Here is the first for the channel. This is a 1990 EZGO Marathon. This is a golden oldie here. Look at that, a little two-cycler. This is the one that has the oil injection system. So you can see here's the two-cycle oil tank. There's a little oil pumper down there on the front of the flywheel. And your straight gas goes in this tank here. So you don't have to mix on this cart. We also got some new lighting. We're going to try this light out here. See how well this works instead of having that stupid drop light. We have a crank no start situation. So the cart cranks over, but it does not want to fire up. It just cranks. So I'm thinking we have some crud in the carb, probably. And here the carburetor's right here, so I'm going to get some gloves. We're going to pull the carburetor off, check it. But first, we're going to pull the plug wire and we're going to check for spark. So let me get the camera set up and we'll do that. Probably going to pull the spark plug as well. Oh, that's on there good. There we go. Make sure we have spark before we determine anything else is wrong. Let's see. So we do have spark. Watch right here. The wire looks good. I gotta pull the plug and make sure it's not fouled. Oof. BP4HS. Well, it doesn't look terrible, but it definitely, you can tell that it has recently not been running very well. So, oh, you know what we're gonna do before we pull the carburetor? We're gonna check for compression, because these two cyclers, I've had them below the fan side crankshaft seal, and if that happens, they won't run. I have personal experience in that happening with my own 84 EZGO, so let's try the compression test first. Alright, so we're going to do a compression test and see what we're at here. Compression is a little weak. It's not terrible, but it certainly could be better. So what I'm going to do now is I'll put that spark plug back in. We're going to pull the carburetor. I know this guy's not going to want to invest in an engine rebuild on this cart. Or at least a top end rebuild, because the bottom end sounds good. It's not making all loud rattling noise like they usually do. Alright, so now we're going to pull the carburetor. This is going to be exciting. I can already tell that fuel line is going to need to be replaced. Yeah, we're going to have to replace that fuel line. Get this off. Sometimes they need a little coaxing. Check our air filter too here and see what that looks like. This will just give us a little more room as well. There. This will give us some more access to get in here to pull this out of the way. See how well, if at all, these are going to come out. Ooh, this one's coming out pretty easily. That almost never happens. These little cable stops are a pain right in the ass. Sometimes they don't come off. Sometimes they do. These ones are actually... Well, I spoke too soon because now the choke doesn't want to come off. See, this one is proving to be a little bit more difficult because of where it's located. This stiff fuel line has got to go. We got to get some rubber on that. Okay. This one's not gonna come off. As they typically don't like to when they get to be this old. Oh, there we go. I didn't think that was actually going to come off, but it did. That's good. Okay, and then this one here, this is for the oil pump. That one comes off just like so. Now this one here is the governor. There's a metal disc down by the drive or the driven clutch, which is the one on the rear diff. That one, when that plate swings out, which oh, it's still there and functioning. If the engine over revs, the plate swings out and it pulls this cable on the carburetor and it closes the throttle body down so it doesn't let it over rev. Pretty neat. Alright, so I think we're going to have to cut this, because we're going to put a new filter since we're doing carburetor work. Okay. This one we can get the box end in. This is probably one of the biggest downsizes or downfalls of this cart, this generation, is these carburetors are in here in such a way that it's not exactly super easy to get in here with your fingers. So you have to basically work at it until you can move it with your finger. Okay, the carburetor is now free. It's not stuck with the gaskets anymore. I've worked on these many times. These engines are pretty bulletproof, to be honest. As long as you don't beat the snot out of them. Though they do take a beating. Okay. Here is our 2-cycle carburetor. Alright, so what I'm going to do is we're going to get this cracked open and we'll get it cleaned up and see what's going on with it. Knock some of this. Just knock some of the heavy surface dirt off. Or at least attempting to. Okay, so it's a 9/16 bolt here on the bottom of the bowl, or 14 millimeter. Probably stuck good too. Oh, ooh, no, that almost never happens. Oh yeah, I could see the gunk in there already. I'm just gonna let some of the gasoline drain off. I don't know if you can see how yellow that is, but that is pretty gnarly. I'm really curious though to see what kind of... Oh! Well, I think there's where we found our problem. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this. I got to block the bottom of this so I don't lose any of it. See if I could show you here. If you can see on the bottom side over here, see how there's that little bit of gel looking stuff? You can see how it's like almost separated. That's water. And there's dirt in there. You can see how the water's sitting on the bottom almost. See how it's, oops, see how it's on the bottom there? That little orange blob in the middle of the bottom of the bowl? Yeah, that's water. That's our problem. And not only that, I mean, look at all the solids in here. Look at all this. This is all, like, I mean, you can hear that's all solid chunkies. I could hear they're hitting the bowl here, or the floor here, and they're making noise. Like we figured out what our problem was. There are a few rust chunks in the bottom of this carburetor, to say the least. So what I'll do is I'll just take a screwdriver and see if I can break them up. I'll take a wire brush, a steel brush, a little bit of carburetor cleaner on it, put some in the bowl here, and get as much off of this as I can. Just to get it clean, you want to try to get as much of the rust out. You just don't want to, you really don't want to leave anything in there as far as solid chunks go, because they're only going to come back and block the carburetor again, and you're going to be doing this all over again. Or you're going to be paying somebody to do this all over again. Yeah, okay, there you go. You can probably see the bottom of the carburetor, how it's all pitted. You really can't do a whole lot about that, but that's about as clean as we're going to get it. That was our problem for sure. That was full of shit. Oh, look at the main isn't even tight. I didn't even have to crack it loose. Typically you have to crack them loose to get them out. This one just doesn't want to fall out. There we go. Put that there. I like the two cyclers because the float pin, you don't need a arbor press to get the damn thing out. There's a float valve. So in order to get this out, you really should get this out. This is where the float valve sits. You need a 10 millimeter and a small extension, and then you can basically, it should come out. Sometimes they don't like to. This one's being a little stubborn. You don't want to give it too much brute force, because if you do, you could end up stripping something or breaking the float valve, the float tabs off. We don't have to take this off. This has 2 bolts in it, but you don't have to take it off. That out. Crack this loose here, just this jam nut, so we can take this out. This is our needle valve. Okay, and that's basically everything that comes off or out. There's really nothing else that you need to remove. This is basically a stripped down, I mean, there's, you know, the butterfly valve levers for the choke and for the throttle. There's the idle set screw. That you don't really need to take out because it doesn't plug into any orifices or anything. It's just all, and there's one Welch plug right here. I've never ever removed this Welch plug and had any other issues. I've always been able to get these things clean without removing that. Now that Welch plug there, I don't really know what it does exactly. I think it's just there for when they were doing some drilling. I don't know, because I mean I could see the other side of it through in here, but I've never removed it. I've never had any need to remove that Welch plug, so it's fine, you can leave it in. Alright, let's start getting this thing cleaned up and put back together. First I'm going to cut the rest of this. Pull that off. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just blowing carburetor cleaner gently through all the ports that are here in both directions. And we just want to make sure that this is also clean. This is the overflow. Okay. Come on, little guy. Okay. So none of the fluid coming out that I'm spraying in is coming out as varnishy, so we know there's not a lot of varnish on the inside of this carburetor. It's actually pretty good as far as being clean, so that's a good sign. Definitely a good sign. And then we'll give it one quick cleaning right after we clean all this other stuff. You always want to try to give them the best cleaning you can, because you're already there, you're already in it, so you might as well just take the thing completely apart and go for it, you know what I mean? Okay, there's that. And then once I get it ready to go back together, I will definitely give everything another quick rinse down just to make sure I get all of the dirt off on the surfaces after touching it, because my gloves are dirty. I mean, you can, if you want, you could change your gloves often, which probably wouldn't hurt. Putting the main back in, give it a little snug. It doesn't need to be reefed down incredibly tight or anything. Okay, then I'm going to take the float valve itself. One thing to be careful with these, with the rubber on the tips, if you get carburetor cleaner on them tips, a lot of times the rubber will swell and it could cause more issues, but I typically do like to try to clean off the aluminum shaft, because that way if this little plunger on the end here is stuck up, which it's not, it's actually free moving, so we're good. And then I'll just give it a quick blow dry in there. And also too, if your float is cracked, it'll have liquid in it, and that'll be quite apparent when you take it apart that it'll have liquid in it. If it's cracked, you might as well just get a new carb, unless you can find a replacement float, which is a little more difficult. I mean, for what these carburetors cost, they're really not that expensive. You're better off just replacing it. Okay, and there's my rinse. And then you can see when it's... I'm going to do a whole series on carburetor cleanings, but you can see that it's moving freely, so there's no obstructions. We're good. I'm going to reinstall the... Oh wait, you know what I want to do first? I want to take this apart. Get this cleaned out. Not always necessary to take this completely apart, but again, if you're in here, you might as well. This is a little tricky. Ooh, come on. Oh, this don't always want to come apart, and if it doesn't come apart, and as long as you can get fluid, like carburetor cleaner through it, you should be okay, because a lot of times these stupid little things inside here, these will break, and then you have a whole other problem. So I will confirm our passageways are clear. Oops. Now we're ready to reinstall the bowl. This is just how I do it, and I've been successful at the way I do it. There's other guys out there that do it a different way, and that's fine. There's multiple ways to get to the same end result, which is the cart running. Okay, that's on. Now we just got to put all the other components back in. We're also going to retune this carburetor as well, but we got to get it running first before we can do that. A lot of times you can put a little hose on the end of these. Get the carburetor cleaner to spray through it. But that's just how I do it, like that. This one here goes in until it stops, and then just give it a little, just to make sure it's snug. Make sure it's snug, but you don't need to crank it and reef it in. And then here's our needle valve. I'm just going to make sure this is free of debris. And this has a set screw, which it should be pretty close when you put it back together. I'm going to start it there and then see what happens. Okay, so the carburetor now is reassembled, so we could basically put this right back in the cart, and we got to put some new fuel line and a filter on it, and we should be ready to rock and roll. Okay, now we're going to reinstall carburetor. It's basically same thing, reverse order. I'm willing to bet this hasn't been done in many, many years. That was probably the first time that this carburetor has been cleaned or given any type of service in all them years. Now this part here could be a little tricky, getting the washers back in place. So what I like to do is I'll take a long needle nose pliers like so, and then I will slide them on, and then the nut, I do my best to get it on with my finger. Sometimes you got to take the gloves off for this, but not always. Once you get it started, you're okay. Or you drop it on the ground and then you have to move the cart to find it. I just want to get this one started here, and then we'll get the other side started. Okay, there we go. It's caught. This one's not as difficult because it's a little more open right here. And you can use the carburetor to help you hold it on the stud there. Okay. And again, don't reef them down too tight because you will damage something. Just need to be good and snug. Okay. All right, there's that. What I'm going to do now is we're going to reinstall the air. This could be a little tricky too, because they don't give you a lot of slack to work with on these. Get this in place, tighten that down, and your air line is hooked up. Get that good and snug. Okay, and I'll put the air filter in last. I just want to make sure I get all this stuff here first. I'll reinstall my drain line. There's our oil pump line, and that's the cable that pulls the oil filter open and closed as you adjust the throttle. Okay, there's our choke. Make sure the choke arm is all the way in, which it is. Take our cable stop. Try to put the round side. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but see how it has a flat side and a rounded side? You always want to try to put the round side towards the part that moves. Okay. Looks like this is bent a little bit here, so bend it back. Okay, there we go. Get your Allen wrench. And then just snug it up, because the choke doesn't need to be gunga tight either. You just need it tight enough to allow you to actuate the choke. Alright, then we'll insert our throttle cable and our governor cable. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind with these engines, okay? These engines are designed to run, or when you press the pedal, the throttle is spring-loaded to full throttle, okay? So if this ever broke off, or if this cable stay ever came loose, your cart will go into full throttle, even if you let go of the pedal. Now, it will, or it should at least, shut off when you let go of the pedal, but sometimes it doesn't. It'll just keep running. It'll be like a runaway diesel kind of thing. Just keep that in mind. I found the spot where this cable stay was actually at. Cable keepers, they call them. Cable stays, cable clamps, whatever name you choose to give it. Its job is essentially the same. Now you can see how when you press on the pedal, how the cable the throttle opens, and then you let go of the throttle or the pedal, the throttle closes. And then your governor, this is a little bit more critical where you get this. This is basically going to keep your engine from failing if you overrun it, over-rev it down a hill or something. So we keep this far out. I got it in the same spot it was when I took it off. Okay, so that's nice and snug. Okay, so we're all back together as far as cables go. I think we might actually be changing all this fuel line because it's not very firm. Yeah, I think we will. Let's change all these fuel lines out. I'd feel better knowing that my fuel lines are new. These clamps aren't even holding this hard, stiff stuff on, so. Yeah, look at how, I mean, you can see how loose that is. I mean, that's with clamps on it. Okay, so we're just going to size this up. I'd like to give it a little bit of slack so it's not so rigid. And then we're going to put some new cable clamps on these. And that'll give it a nice smooth flow. It's a little, okay, it's just below the seat line, so we're good, we're good. I actually take off a little bit because I need a piece for the the primary fuel pump. Or fuel filter, rather. I'll pull that off, and we'll put some speed clamps on these. We won't use these stupid, we won't use these terrible, whatchamacallit, these clamps. Okay, now we'll try to, there we go. Oop. Okay, I have this little piece of hose here. We have this filter here, this filter up here, this filter here, and this I might shorten that a little bit too. This hose here. Okay, so let's get some clamps on this and we'll be done. We'll get it running and out of here. Try to orient them as close to how they're going to be on the cart. Okay, we'll tighten that one down last. Let's get this. Get this one tightened down here first, so it stops dropping down on me. Now the trick to this one here is we got to get the actual. There we go. Get the clamp itself down in behind the fuel pump. See, and this also enables you to get in there with a ratchet and an extension. And now we'll clamp this one down. These are all quarter drive. I use the small quarter drive ones. Let's get this one in place here. Let's see how, I think how we're going to do this one is this way. And this is all personal preference and ease of installation and all that stuff, because don't forget, this has to be a serviceable area on the cart. You got to be able to change this filter. There's normally only one filter, but there was two in here when I got here. It's going to leave with two filters, so that's how it is. Okay. So now I need two more. That one there, and then we need another one on the bottom. Just like so. We'll slip this in. Just like so. Try to get it down in between the... It is a really tight location though, just keep that in mind. You may have to, I'm going to highly suggest that you take the air filter box off. This one here is just getting in my way. So we're going to tighten this down first. Okay. This gives you a little more leverage sometimes, right where you need it. So let's see if we can get in here and get this one as well. There we go. Yep, sometimes the nut driver just don't work. You need to get in there with a ratchet and a socket. You also have to steer it, which is pretty normal. Okay, that is that. Okay, let's see how well we did here. Forgot to hook up the spark plug wire. Okay, so we got the belt off because I had to tow it. So while we have the belt off, put the belt back on. Okay. So she runs. At least it started. So let's see how this air filter looks. You can see the air filter is not terrible, so we're not going to change it. That there. 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 Washer. So it's the next day. I had to stop work and do another task. But we come back to it. So now we got to do is just get it running. Make sure it stays running. And for this task, you have to jack these carts up. These carts do not have a physical neutral like the 4-stroke, 4-cycle gas carts do, where you can kind of find the neutral position on the rear diff. So you got to jack up at least one of the tires. See if this fires right up without even choking it. Sometimes they do. Well, maybe not. Oh, look at that. Look at that. The choke came off. That's unusual. Okay. I'll find it after I move the cart. Watch. There. Okay. Okay, so let's see if it runs. This cart runs good. Nice and strong. Yeah, that's a winner. All right, guys, that is it. Here's the filters. Put them in. There's the fuel line. You can see why it was such a cluster cuss to get in there because of the angle. But yeah, that's pretty much it. This one is done. It runs, it starts, it drives. Let's get it out of here. On to the next.